An amateur photographer making pictures. Sometimes it's hard to get everything just right, and the person in front of the lens has all the fun. States alone, there is a growing army of 40 million amateur cameramen. We shoot more than 2 billion pictures a year. That's enough to make a portrait of every man, woman, and child on Earth. But the rewards of photography are many. Camera in hand, every man can have the power of a movie director. And every woman can be a glamour girl. Through the camera's eye, we can record forever the faces of those we love. Another favorite use of the camera is to prove to friends we were actually there, under the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, or in Indian country out west. Camera can also reveal relationships of families and ideas and things, some impossible to see with the naked eye. The inside architecture of our own bodies. The secret beauty of how roses bloom. The frozen millionth of a second during the service of a tennis ball. The camera can record the look of events too terrible for man's own naked eye to see. Truly, our modern world would be a different and less wonderful place without the camera's all-seeing, all-revealing eye. And so it is strange to remember that photography has been with us only a little more than 100 years. Suppose there were no photography. Suppose we could turn back the clock 100 years. And then 10,000 more. Back to when primitive man painted himself and his animals on the walls of caves and carved stone images of his kings and his gods. For man was always an image maker. He hungered for beauty and immortality. And in the making of images, he found a way for his creative spirit to live on after his own death. In images, man worshipped his God. Primitive man worshipped the sun, source of his life, source of the very light by which he saw his world. By the Middle Ages, men were seeking ways to use light itself to make images. Painters invented ingenious devices for accurately reproducing the forms of nature. And it was Leonardo da Vinci who first described the camera obscura. This was actually a man-made eye, a dark box fitted with a tiny hole or lens through which light could pass. Artists could see in the camera obscura a true picture of reality, drawn on his ground glass screen by the light of the sun. If only some magic way could be found to fix this picture, make it permanent. Why then, they thought, every man with help from the sun could make perfect images. Joseph Nicephore Niepce, Louis-Jacques Daguerre. These were the men, with the Englishman, Fox Talbot, who in the beginning of the 19th century invented the first practical systems of photography. The early daguerreotype plates were slow. Only still subjects like sculpture could be photographed because exposure had to be as long as an hour. One day, Daguerre photographed a street in Paris. It happened that on the sidewalk stood a man having his boots blacked. He stood still long enough, this unknown gentleman, to become the first man ever to be photographed. The craze to have one's photograph made was instantaneous. Everyone, or almost everyone, wanted to experience this new wonder. In America, one of the most successful photographers was Matthew Brady. In his fashionable New York studio, he photographed Jenny Lind, the Swedish singer, Brigham Young, the Mormon leader, Samuel Morse, inventor of the telegraph, and the President of the United States. When the Civil War came, Brady rigged a darkroom in a wagon and took to the field, recording for the first time in all history the true look of war, the bodies of the dead. The iron instruments of destruction and the ruin of cities. Cameramen of the Civil War have preserved for us a true document of the death of Abraham Lincoln, the chair in which he sat, the great funeral procession through the streets of Washington, and the proud face of John Wilkes Booth, who fired the bullet into Lincoln's brain. The camera brings us face to face today with Booth's partners in crime. Louis Payne, a Confederate veteran. Michael O'Loughlin, a Confederate veteran. George Atzerodt, a blockade runner. David Herold, a druggist. And a woman named Mrs. Surratt, accused of harboring the men. 4 of the conspirators, including Mrs. Surratt, were hanged. After the Civil War, the camera was used to record the opening of the American West and as a tool of exploration around the world, bringing into Victorian parlors the image and poetry of far places. In France, a man named Nadar ventured up in a balloon to photograph Paris. He was caricatured by the artist Daumier as Nadar raising photography to a high art. Photography steadily grew in popularity. Soon every family occasion had to be celebrated in the studio. No marriage was complete till the bride had registered her white loveliness on the photographic plate. Then in 1888, a young man named George Eastman invented a flexible film base. Immediately, the glass plates of the past were obsolete. Amateur photography for the first time became practical. By the age of 25, George Eastman's idea earned him $1 million. He built a mansion in Rochester, New York. Eastman put on the market a camera called the Kodak, which made round pictures on the new flexible film. boast of the Eastman Kodak Company came true. You press the button, we do the rest. Other inventors were busy too. Someone invented a camera in the form of a vest pocket watch that actually made pictures. A camera was built in the form of a cane. These were called detective cameras, and the idea was to make pictures secretly. Though how anyone could hope to camouflage a camera in a gun is hard to imagine. Before photography, the popular parlor pastime was projecting slides in a magic lantern. Very early people tried to introduce motion into their lantern slides. At first, this was accomplished by hand. Then ingenious contraptions were built to achieve motion through use of mirrors set in a revolving drum. And later by viewing a series of silhouettes through fast-moving cutout slots. But it was not till the time of Thomas Alva Edison that true motion pictures became possible. Edison first invented the electric light, a man-made sun. He then helped perfect the intermittent movement of the motion picture camera. Once these basic inventions were achieved, the motion picture could become a reality. The greatest entertainment, industry, and art the world had ever known. This was a time of invention and new technology, a time of industrial revolution in entertainment, communication, and travel. One invention was especially important for photography, the horseless carriage. For the automobile carried the new legion of amateurs out into their photogenic countryside. The bulky studio camera soon gave way to popular hand cameras, and millions of amateur photographers got into the act. When the airship Hindenburg exploded, it was an amateur who got the shot. Camera design improved. Each new gadget seemed to mean better pictures. These fast cameras, lenses, and films also meant that a new kind of journalism was now possible. Throughout the world, cameramen could photograph almost anything, anytime. Stay-at-homes could see the actual look of foreign lands, be present at great events. New photo magazines were published and soared to giant circulations. In 1936, a magazine was founded based on a new idea that pictures themselves could tell the story. Previously, photographs had been used as illustrations to a written text. But Life magazine proposed to use words only as caption material, and with photographs, to eyewitness the history of nations, chronicle the look of far places, and the gestures of the proud. On the masthead of Life's first issue appeared a portrait of Margaret Bourke-White. Her camera work for Life began with a compassionate record of the American land and its people during the years of the Great Depression. She went abroad to photograph leaders and statesmen of far lands. During the Second World War, she was in Moscow to record the German bombardment of the Kremlin. Many of Miss Bourke-White's assignments have been covered from the air. She flew over the ruins of Cologne, Germany, after its devastation by Allied bombing planes. After the war, she continued her aerial work by going up in the Air Force's new jet bombers. She made a dramatic series of photographs from the air of American cities. Headquarters of Life magazine is a skyscraper in Rockefeller Center in the heart of New York City. One of the first photographers Life hired back in 1936 was a man named Alfred Eisenstaedt, a shy and gentle man, friend of secretaries, kings, and movie stars. He has brought back to the laboratory rolls of exposed film from more than 1,000 assignments, covering every conceivable subject from a hurricane to Hitler and Mussolini shaking hands. More than 1 million of his negatives have been developed in Life's laboratory. Working with tiny 35mm films, each the size of a postage stamp, Eisenstaedt has become a technical perfectionist, insisting on scientific control through all the photographic processes, exposure, development, and the final carefully enlarged print. Alfred Eisenstaedt was a pioneer in candid photography and the sequence picture story, techniques of modern photojournalism which have become basic to capturing the essence of time and place. People who saw his early pictures found themselves present at the events he photographed, friends of his portrait subjects. Eisenstaedt has photographed more famous people than any other photographer in the world, beginning back in 1929 with a young German actress named Marlene Dietrich. Always working with a miniature camera, Eisenstadt's eye has recorded the faces of student nurses in an operating room amphitheater, the opera at La Scala, Milan, a meeting of two dictators, Emperor Haile Selassie, the British painter Augustus John, George Bernard Shaw, the Queen Mother of England,
the world from the United States, General Douglas,
and a smiling Britain in a shining hour.
to fly to tiny Ie Shima Island on Friday. This is the spot of land just west of Okinawa, where beloved war correspondent Ernie Pyle died from the bullet of a Japanese sniper. MacArthur told the Japanese that when they arrive at Ie, they will be flown in an American plane to his Manila headquarters, where surrender terms will be dictated.
The novelist Ernest Hemingway, Bishop Fulton Sheen, Albert Einstein, physicist Norbert Wiener, physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, philosopher Bertrand Russell, and an unknown Hollywood starlet named Marilyn Monroe. Since George Eastman's first Kodak, the growing army of amateurs has built photography into the world's most popular hobby, a worldwide fraternity with its own secret signs and private language. Photo bugs like the fraternity of hot jazz lovers and sports car enthusiasts lavish loving care on their favorite instruments. Cameras with exotic names like Hasselblad, Nikon, Polaroid Land, Speed Graphic, Bell & Howell, and Plowbow Makina. The photographic industry in the United States alone now earns a net profit of about $1 billion a year.
Sure. Let them try it for a couple of days. We have a 10-day exchange policy.
It won't be a surprise, but if I'm a scrap, that's right.
One of the most famous freelance photojournalists is a man named Weegee, a kind of photographic primitive and an amateur at heart. Weegee, like other amateurs, delights in casing the camera stores for new equipment. Much of Weegee's income has been earned from murder. Weegee's day begins, usually, in the late afternoon, in his combination dark room and bed, just off Times Square. He lights up last night's cigar butt and sets about his day's work. He begins a working day down on the Bowery. He meets a man with an extra coat over his arm and inquires about the price. Weegee himself is a 14-year-old immigrant boy from Europe, got his start on the Bowery. He has been hungry and homeless there and has slept with other down-and-outers on the cold pavement. He meets a man drinking a carton of milk, and on the Bowery figures that's news. Weegee's only love is his city, New York, and he pounds its pavement like a faithful cop on the beat, his camera always ready for action. He visits Sammy's Bar on the Bowery, an old-time place he helped make famous with his pictures. Weegee is often asked what kind of a candid camera he uses. He answers, there is really no such thing. It's the photographer who must be candid. Weegee covers police court. A man arrested for dressing as a woman. A man arrested for pouring kerosene over his wife and setting her afire. A murderess. A man named Esposito, just after he killed a cop. A 14-year-old boy arrested for strangling a little girl. Weegee and his camera remember the time Frank Sinatra had his smash success crooning for the Bobby Soxers at the Paramount. young policeman's first shocked look at a corpse. Weegee decides to go to the movies, suitably disguised, and using infrared flashbulbs to photograph unobserved in the dark. Weegee can also be a highbrow. He covers opening night at the Metropolitan Opera. Mrs. George Washington Cavanaugh, and friend, and critic. Weegee and his camera are also welcome backstage at the nightclubs and out front to photograph the acts. And he covers hot jazz, jam sessions at the late night spots. Weegee has photographed with love, humor, and compassion the people of New York City asleep. There are as many different ways to see the world as there are people. Each of us sees the same world, but we see it through our own eyes in a personal way. And so when we take up a camera, our photographs are a record of how we see the world. They record what interests us. The photographer can be an occasional snapshooter, making photographic notes of things he is pleased to remember. He may be a professional, a journalist who photographs with love the city that is his home. He may be a man whose pictures bring into focus the world's great personages and events. The photographer may also be a dedicated artist whose work, like that of a painter or writer, is to reveal the world as he sees it, to photograph with such skill and reverence that through his eye we see the world fresh and newborn, as if we had never seen it before. On the western shore of the North American continent, on the northern coast of California, is a promontory of land called Point Lobos. For almost 50 years, a man, a photographer, lived and worked here, leaving the ocean and rocks for occasional photographic journeys across America, but always returning to the place he loved best, Point Lobos, California. This is Edward Weston, one of the great camera artists in the history of photography. For the whole first half of our 20th century, this little man devoted himself to his craft, making pictures that have earned him honors and international fame, working with a singleness of purpose and purity of spirit almost religious in nature. Edward Weston has recorded the power of the Pacific, the way it pounds the shore, carving out of solid rock strange forms and sculptures. His eye moved over all nature. And whether he was photographing people, friends and family, sprawled on the rocks of Lobos, or photographing the strangely twisted cypress trees, it was all done without thought of the marketplace and material riches. One man composing a visual poem out of time and silvered photographic paper, out of the forms of matter and life and death. Weston is an old man and ill. We meet him at the age of 70, engaged in the last big creative project of his life, the printing and indexing of 8,000 of his greatest photographs. In this work, he is helped by his daughter-in-law, Dodie Weston. And while Dodie indexes and captions the pictures, in the darkroom, one of Edward's 4 sons, Brett, prints his father's negatives. Edward Weston used hardly any equipment or procedure that was not known in the year 1900. Weston and his sons photograph on 8 by 10-inch film and never make enlargements. They print by contact in an old-fashioned wooden printing frame and use an out-of-style developer named Amidol, which produces richly beautiful tones, but stains the fingernails a jet black. And then for Brett comes that magic moment, known to every photographer, when the pure white paper develops up into a photographic print. Edward Weston is ill with Parkinson's disease and no longer has the free use of his hands. The work of printing is done by Brett under his father's direct supervision. Photography for Edward Weston has been a life work, but it has also been a way to record his own personal life, the things he wants to remember. Like the rest of us, Edward Weston has kept through the years his own personal snapshot album. I felt drawn to this primitive land below our borders, photographing all objects now needle sharp, photographing everything that interested my eye. The countryside of Mexico moved me deeply, and its towns. I came to love the Mexican people. My son, Brett, traveled with me to Mexico. He soon turned in his butterfly net for the Graflex and began photographing by my side. Together we toured Mexico, photographing the monumental remains of ancient Indian civilizations. The strangely powerful carvings in stone made centuries before Columbus sailed west. But soon I had to return to my studio in Mexico City to earn a living. And it wasn't much different there from photographing the debutantes and dowagers of Glendale and Pasadena. But this was a time of revolution in art as well as in politics.
Viva Mexico!
A time when the radical Diego Rivera wore a pistol on his fat hip and painted the first of his giant historical frescoes. A time when the fiery young Jose Clemente Orozco was beginning his great work. I met the gentle French Catholic painter Jean Charlot. The artists of Mexico invited me into their homes, said they found my photographs a way of seeing from which they as painters could learn. I photographed these new friends: Rose Covarrubias, Galvan, president of the Mexican Senate, and the lovely Tina Modotti, one day as she recited poetry. But I felt myself a stranger, self-exiled in a far land. My thoughts were of the north, of my sons. Photography during a time of revolution is hard. Even working in a church, a stranger with a camera is in danger, suspect by both sides. But I persisted. I photographed the remarkable Dr. Otto standing before a wall on which a young woman named Nawi Olin had written a verse about love and about death. Love and death. Amor y muerte. Suddenly these words seemed to me thematic of all Mexico, expressed in revolution, in art, and in the passionate Latin ritual of fighting the bulls. I knew finally the time had come to go home. My father, Dr. Edward Burbank Weston. How well I remember him. And my mother. She died when I was only 5, and I was really raised by my sister, May. I remember the day Father gave me my first camera, one of Mr. Eastman's new Kodaks. The year was 1902, and my first excited photographs. An old pier on a marshy shore. Waves rolling in under a stormy sky. snow-covered field. My life was changed from that day on. School and games didn't interest me. I was in love with photography. And how dearly I remember my first wife, Flora Chandler. Our warm, outdoor days of courtship. Our honeymoon, a pack trip into the high Sierra. We had 4 boys, Flora and I. Chandler, Brett, Neil, and Cole. 4 mouths to feed. And it was all to be done through photography. I opened my first studio in Glendale, California. And sitters did come to the studio to pose on my old horsehair sofa. My photographs of women, idealized them in the soft focus style of the times. Each became gentle and dreamy-eyed. My work at this time was influenced by Japanese prints I had seen. They taught me the value of eliminating detail, and I translated this into photography by casting a romantic shimmer of light over my subjects. The studio prospered. I began building a bank account and something of a reputation. But soon, despite recognition and financial success, my work no longer satisfied me. Commercial practice of the time required that every negative be retouched, taking out the sweet lines of character, reducing an honest photograph to a false-face mask. Portrait sitters demanded that my camera tell lies. To earn a living, I gave in and hated myself for it. At the San Francisco Exposition of 1915, my pictures won a medal. But it wasn't the award that excited me. It was seeing there for the first time modern French painting. These painters had broken the chains of tradition. They'd found new ways of seeing. My mind was in turmoil, for I knew there were better ways of seeing in photography too. I was groping for them, and these paintings helped to crystallize my new ideas. I began to experiment. What happens, for instance, when light strikes an angular surface? A kind of camera cubism, perhaps, like Picasso. I went wild with new ideas to try. I thought hard thoughts about photography, about retouching, about earning a living in commercial portraiture. And I finally resolved that no matter what the cost in money and comfort, my soft focus way of working had to change. I would instead photograph things truly and sharply, pursue photography and my personal vision honestly, wherever they led. So I made my first trip across America to New York City, where a magazine named Camera Work was published. I visited the exhibition gallery of its editor, Alfred Stieglitz. Besides photographs, Stieglitz exhibited advanced painting and sculpture and was an encourager of all the arts. Stieglitz showed me his own early photographs, sensitive images made in Berlin before the turn of the century. Gentle, lyric pictures of his new land and his new city. At Stieglitz's gallery, I also met a young man named Edward Steichen, who showed me his current work. I was particularly impressed by the power and nobility of his portraits. Another important member of Stieglitz's group was the young Paul Strand. I found his portraits beautiful, and I responded to the new realism of his candid portraits made in the streets of New York. And then, leaving New York, I was off again, on a longer trip. And so it had to be home again, by ship to San Francisco in the chilly winter of 1926. Young Brett came back with me too, and our hearts were heavy with memories of Mexico. But after that primitive land, the United States was overwhelming. Florida was gone from my life now, but it was good to be home again where my boys were, where I had sunk my roots. And it seemed to me now that I had been too much traveling, seeing things too broadly and too big. Some toadstools near the studio caught my eye, and then two more. These lowly vegetables seemed a mystery, and through the camera's eye, I tried to reveal their form more clearly than the eye itself could see. I felt myself a discoverer, a Columbus, exploring new miniature worlds never before seen by man. Soon, close was no longer good enough. I had to get inside these vegetable worlds, photographing the architecture of their hearts. And then I discovered the beauty of the green pepper. Most other vegetable species are much alike, one eggplant or squash being similar to another. But the green pepper is an individualist. Its genes like to play games, experiment with strange mutations. Now friends began to say they saw in my vegetables symbolic human forms like lovers embracing. This surprised me and shocked me at first, for I see in the vegetables only abstract forms. Yet when friends point out these resemblances, I must admit, yes, I see what you mean. The good poet Walt Whitman was right in saying that the map and design of the biggest things could be seen in the smallest. The whole world in a leaf of grass. So it was that my attention turned once more from the bigness of little things to the space and richness of the American land. And I found myself once more outdoors, under the sky, with my camera. During the 1920s and 30s, the America that Edward Weston knew as a boy was changing fast. It was a time of economic boom and bust, of technological change. Edward Weston's eye found the new machine forms beautiful. During these years, his camera eye also chronicled the faces of the leaders and makers of cultural change. Composers like Arnold Schoenberg, Igor Stravinsky. The pianist Walter Gieseking. The poet E.E. Cummings. His friend and neighbor, the poet Robinson Jeffers. The British novelist D.H. Lawrence. Journalist and muckraker Lincoln Steffens. He photographed a young woman named Eleanor Stone. The dancer Harold Kreutzberg, and recorded the time when Eleanor saw Kreutzberg dance and was so impressed she went home and shaved off her own hair. In Hollywood, Weston photographed the young Henry Fonda and an actor named James Cagney. As always, he continued to earn a living by commercial portraiture, but now photographing sharply. Weston continued to turn his camera's eye on the city and the machine, and it began to seem to him now that machine forms were not merely beautiful, but also threatening, a danger to the spirit of man. He felt that machine civilization takes man dangerously far from nature, that unless man learns to live wisely with the machine, he is in danger of becoming an automaton, a mechanical man. On a visit to Hollywood, Weston found in a movie studio a whole city built of papier-mâché, a place where stairs were built leading nowhere, a make-believe place where people were constructed of bronze and plastic and rubber. March 18, 1937. Dear Mr. Weston, I am delighted to write you that today the trustees of the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation have appointed you to a fellowship. Your project is to make a series of photographs of the American West. The trustees have awarded you a stipend of $2,000. And so it was that Edward Weston became the first photographer ever to win a Guggenheim Fellowship. It was at this time I met the lovely Caddis Wilson. She was a tall, beautiful girl with finely proportioned body, face well freckled, with blue eyes and golden brown hair to her shoulders. She had a keen mind and talent as a writer. We were married and set off together on the Guggenheim project to photograph the West. One night we rested in our sleeping bags outside the rim of Death Valley and saw the moon rise. And saw the day break. When the sun was up, we packed our gear in the car and set out on a photographic adventure. To cross the rim of Death Valley and to move down through its oppressive heat to the valley's dry floor. On the hot, cracked floor of Death Valley, we came upon the body of a traveler, only hours dead. We were too late to help. We photographed the lost ghost towns of the West, business buildings and homes deserted by their people when the mines gave out. Then we moved on to the highlands, photographing in spring and in the winter. An assignment Edward Weston enjoyed particularly came in 1940 when the Limited Editions Club commissioned him to illustrate Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. He had loved the poems of Walt Whitman since boyhood and was now delighted to hit the road again, traveling with Caddis, to photograph American images to fit the poems of Mr. Whitman. Edward and Caddis took Walt Whitman's open road, exploring parts of the United States they had never seen before, photographing the places where Americans live, a prairie farm, a deserted mansion in Maine, a log cabin in Tennessee, gingerbread Gothic in Massachusetts, a church in the Southwest. Pueblo Indian Village. The forms of shipping in the sea delighted Weston's eyes. They had delighted Whitman's. Edward and Caddis took the open road down to Tennessee, where they met a man named Edmondson, who earned his living carving the native stone into images for graves. Whitman's words echoed in Weston's mind. Come, lovely and soothing death, undulate round the world, serenely arriving, in the day, in the night, to all, to each, sooner or later, delicate death. But mostly on his Leaves of Grass travels, Edward Weston celebrated the joy of being alive, the richness of living in Walt Whitman's America, the fertility of its fields, the fatness of its barns, and the hard hands and free spirit of its pioneer people. For Edward Weston, the coming of war meant an end to travel. He returned to his home on the California coast, where he and Caddis took up duty as volunteer air raid wardens. Edward's 4 sons went into military service. And while Edward Weston watched the skies, he saw in them new forms and photographed them. During the war years, he photographed too, as always, the California coast. And in his backyard, he photographed with love his family of cats. They numbered more than 40, and Edward Weston knew the name of each. During the war years, Edward continued his study of the human figure. This was an interest he had begun back in the days of his early studio when he photographed his own boys as they grew. He then photographed the model in the studio. And later he took the model out of doors, under trees, and on the great sand dunes. After the war was done, Edward Weston took up again his photographic travels. He was at the peak of his creative power now, and his name and photographs were known through the world. Unwilling to compromise his personal vision with retouching or journalism or advertising agencies, he never achieved even a modest wealth. But it was the work, the creative seeing that was good and rewarding. And when work was done, there was always the simple cabin in the pines to come home to. And Caris to come home to and be with. And Caris to travel with, work with. And then one day, there was no Caris. Edward Weston had been 52 years old when they married, and she 19. After 11 good years together, the marriage ended. Edward Weston was alone now, an old man, thinking back to the days of his youth, thinking back to the babyhood of his 4 boys and how they grew to manhood. Welcoming now the birth of his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Thinking back to himself as a young photographer, remembering his life and the joy of it. And then life struck Edward Weston a blow. He was stricken with palsy, a weakness and trembling that wasted the body till the photographer sat crippled in a chair, able only to watch other photographers make pictures. But before all work was done, with his hand already so stiffened and trembling he could barely focus or adjust a shutter, Edward Weston once more took to the field. Fighting illness, he set out to see the world freshly and anew, photographing for the first time in color. Began photographing only in color, using the same big camera, but now shooting everything on 8 by 10-inch sheets of Kodachrome and Ektachrome. For the last 4 years of work, the world I had always seen in black and white was warmed and transformed by color. I found strangely that in a way I always had seen the world in color, but to render it in black and white was the discipline of my life. Now, in color, I had to learn new techniques, new ways of seeing. What a good experience it was that a few years were allowed to chase my personal rainbow. For what I tried to do my life long was to reveal the world around us, so that a man who could pass unseeing by a rock or a figure or a face could look at my photograph and say, "Why, yes, What a wonder such a simple thing is. I tried my life long to open the eyes of everyone, my own eyes too, by showing how extraordinary are the most simple things in this wide and wonderful world.
What can you see with your naked eye that you want to remember as time goes by? Your child's first step, a strange far place, the world you live in, a loved one's face. Oh, what can you see with your naked eye?